Being no petitions, has any honourable minister a paper to present? I'll call the Leader of the House.
Thank you, Speaker. Department of Education, Children and Young People. Firstly, the 2023-24 Annual Report, Education and Care Services Ombudsman and National Education and Care Services Freedom of Information and Privacy Commissioners. The Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority Annual Report 23-24 and Education and Care National Amendment Transitional Provisions Regulations 2024. I have a response to petition number 7 of 2025. Department of Natural Resources and Environment Tasmania Fisheries Scallop Amendment Rules 2025. From the same department, Fisheries Biosecurity Order 2025, and again from that department, Fisheries Biosecurity Order number 2 2025, and finally Tas Networks Network Outage Review Final Report.
Does any other honourable minister have a paper to present? Minister Howlett.
Thank you, Speaker. I lay upon the table the Department of Natural Resource and Environment Tasmania response to petition number 1 of 2025, support small-scale Tasmanian meat processors. The Department of Natural Resource and Environment Tasmania response to petition number 6 of 2025, rabbit infestations in Tasmania.
Thank you. Does any other minister have any papers to present? Does any other member have a paper to present? Member for Clark, Mr. Woolley.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I have the honour to bring up the report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee of Public Accounts on Tasmania's proposed Hobart Arts, Entertainment and Sports Precinct planning process. I move that the report be received.
The question is the report be received. Those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Does any other honourable member have a paper to present? Does the clerk have any papers?
Yes, Speaker. I table the report of the Auditor-General number 9 of 2024-25, Department of Health's funding of community service organisations, and the report of the Auditor-General number 10 of 24-25, effectiveness of shared services in the general government sector.
Thank you. I am in receipt of messages and I'm about to stand up so the member... I'm in receipt of a message from the Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor says that a bill for an act to amend the Electoral Act 2004, a bill for an act to amend certain acts and other legislation and provide for matters of a transitional nature consequent on the enactment of the Disability Rights, Inclusion and Safeguarding Act 2024, a bill for an act to amend multiple acts to enable the Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal to review and determine certain matters in accordance with the Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal Act 2010, a bill for an act to amend the Agricultural and Veterinary Chemicals Tasmania Act 1994, the Competition Policy Reform Tasmania Act 1996, the Corporations Tasmania Act 1990, the Federal Court State Jurisdiction Act 1999, the Gene Technology Tasmania Act 2012, the Human Embryonic Research Regulation Act 2003, the Legal Profession Board of Legal Education Rules 2021, the Marine Safety Domestic Commercial Vessel National Law Application Act 2013, the New Tax System Price Exploitation Code Tasmania Act 1999, the Terrorism Preventative Detention Act 2005, the Therapeutic Goods Act 2001, and the Water Efficiency Labelling and Standards. Having been presented to the Lieutenant Governor for the Royal Assent, he has, in his name of His Majesty the King, assented to the said bills. The Honourable Christopher Shanahan, Chief Justice, Lieutenant Governor. I'm also in receipt of a message from the Legislative Council, which I will ask the clerk to read.
Honourable Speaker, the Legislative Council, having passed the following resolution, now transmits the same to the House of Assembly and requests its concurrence therein. Resolved that the Legislative Council, having appointed 2 estimates committees reflecting the distribution of government ministers' portfolio responsibilities, requests that the House of Assembly give leave to all ministers to appear before and give evidence to the relevant Council Estimates Committee in relation to the budget estimates and related documents. C. Farrell, President, Legislative Council, 27 May 2025.
Leader of the House.
I move that the message be taken into consideration forthwith.
Question is that motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
I thank the House and I move that the resolution be agreed to.
Question is the resolution be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. being no further messages, has any honourable minister a bill to introduce? I'll call the Attorney-General.
Thanks very much, Speaker. Speaker, I table the Commissions of Inquiry Amendment Private Sessions Information Bill 2025.
The question is that that bill be now read a first time. Those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act to amend the Commissions of Inquiry Act 1995.
Are there any further bills from ministers? Any further bills from other members? The member for Clark.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I table the Financial Management Amendment Fiscal Responsibility Measures Bill 2025.
The question is that that bill be now read a first time. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act to amend the Constitution Act 1934 and the Financial Management Act 2016 and to consequentially amend the Audit Act 2008.
Are there no further bills from any member? Are there any formal business? There being no formal business, we will move to the matter of public importance, which I believe is Mr. Willie, member for Clark.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and it's my pleasure to rise and speak on this matter of public importance, which is of the highest order. We have a government who is completely out of control when it comes to managing the state's finances, and we had that on display today from the Premier, who was railing against the bill I just tabled. What the Premier was telling people in question time today was that he wants to keep racking up record deficits unchecked, unscrutinised. And we're saying that's going to stop. We are coming from a position that we don't trust this government anymore to manage the state's finances, and they need extra accountability and scrutiny. If they're going to continue to rack up these record deficits, ballooning debt, then the Parliament needs to take a greater role and make them own it and make them explain why they can't manage the state's finances. That's effectively what the Premier was saying today. He doesn't like this bill because he likes to rack up record deficits. This is a government that came to power with no net debt. There was cash and investments in the bank, Honourable Speaker. And when this Premier came to the premiership, there was only $1.3 billion worth of net debt. We have nearly $10 billion in the forward estimates of the budget, which will be out of date on Thursday, and I think that figure's going to increase again. And what does that mean, Honourable Speaker? It means $500 million in the last year of the forward estimates to service that debt. Not pay it off, not pay it down, to just service that debt. That's $500 million not going to schools, it's not going to hospitals, it's not going to houses. It's servicing the Liberal legacy debt. The biggest liability in the state budget now is the Liberal legacy debt, the debt that they are leaving for future generations and future governments to clean up. That's how poor this government is. And we know when it comes to the budget, they can't deliver an honest budget, Honourable Speaker. We've seen that time and time again in recent examples. We've seen government expenditure in recent years absolutely ballooning. We've got a former Treasurer over there. His last effort for government expenditure was 14.5%. Do you know what he tried to predict or forecast in the current budget? Negative 3.5%. I pointed that out to him in estimates. He scoffed at me. I said, you'll be coming back to Parliament asking for more money. Oh, no, we won't be doing that. $500 million later, nearly. 5 months later, they were asking for more money. It's because the forecasting in the budget is unrealistic. In the revised estimates report, their expenditure for this year went up to 2.2%, not negative 3.5% like they were trying to project. But what did they do for next year, Honourable Speaker? They're predicting negative 6.3% growth in the revised estimates. That would be the biggest austerity budget in living memory. There is no way that they are going to limit government expenditure to that figure. And I put the challenge to the Treasurer this week that you actually deliver an honest budget with realistic forecasting, because you are going to get found out otherwise. You're going to be exactly like that former Treasurer over there, coming to Parliament with the credit card out, the Liberal credit card, asking for more money because you cannot manage the state's finances. The forecasting has been so off in recent years. I've got a couple of examples here, and I'll be trying to be quick because I don't have a lot of time, but the 2023-24 budget, they were predicting a surplus for that year in 2021-2022. It deteriorated over the couple of years, and then when they went on to deliver the biggest deficit in the state's history, it just shows, just in a couple of years, how poor their forecasting is. But it wasn't a once-off, Honourable Speaker. There's another example. It's the current financial year. In 2021-22, they were predicting a surplus of $126.8 million. What are they on track for? $1.296.1 billion. And the financial year hasn't actually finished yet, Honourable Speaker. So who knows when we get the update what that figure will actually be. It cannot continue. The Premier today is basically saying he wants this to continue. He wants these record deficits to continue unchecked, and we're saying no, it has to stop. It's not in Tasmania's interest. You've put the Liberal Party in front of Tasmania's interest time and time again, and it's going to stop.
Attorney General.
Thanks very much, Speaker. I'm very pleased to speak on this matter on behalf of our government and to back in Premier Rockliff earlier today. We have a strong plan. Our economy is strong. It is growing. It is strong and it is growing. We plan to build on a very prosperous future for Tasmania. We plan to provide a better Tasmania now and for the future by investing in the things that matter, like health. Just a couple of days ago, announcing record expenditure and investment in health, nearly $10 million a day. And what State Labor haven't acknowledged is the commitment to the capital infrastructure of $660 million for our 4 major hospitals and other infrastructure relating to health all around Tasmania. They haven't acknowledged the $70 million for elective surgery. These are important commitments on the things that are important to Tasmanians, and we're getting on with it. The Premier's made reference to the commitment to infrastructure in terms of education. We've got new schools at Brighton, at Lagana, and sadly, the Premier reminded us of the dismay and the downgrading of our infrastructure under the previous Labor Green government. Well, we've got a plan. We're not going there. We're all about growing Tasmania's economy, keeping it strong, and we will not be going into a slash and burn approach as occurred under the Labor Green government. And we're all about improving the use of taxpayers' money, to use it wisely. It needs to be spent wisely, and that's why we're focused on that. What's happening at the moment is that we've got a strong economy. The gross state product was more than $40 billion. We've got record low unemployment. We're talking about, in history, the lowest unemployment levels, 3.8% according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. We're talking about record retail spending in recent months in terms of those figures. We're talking about a confident business community, because we as a government are backing business, backing industry. The NAB survey said that Tasmania's the top of the tree across all of Australia in terms of business being confident. And in terms of business conditions, Tasmania's again towards the top. So we're pleased and proud about that. Our economy's actually grown 26%, or $8.5 billion, since we came to government. Our state final demand this year was $48.9 billion, a record 12 months for Tasmania. We've got leading the nation in wage growth, 3.9% for 2024, well above the national average of 3.2%. So we're getting on with the job. So debt is manageable despite the scare campaign being run by the opposition. And I'm proud of the investments that we have made as a government, and I'm proud of what will be delivered in the budget on Thursday, which will build a better Tasmania now and for the future by investing in those things that matter. We will have a pathway to surplus and we will get on with the job. What we won't be doing is what State Labor has been promoting, and that is cutting services and higher taxes. They're on the record of seeking an increase in own-sourced revenue. That's higher taxes. And they haven't shown the figures. We want to see their figures in their alternative budget to come clean, because the figures that we have is that it's over $2.7 billion or $1.85 million a day in higher taxes. So if you've got your plan, so you've never delivered a costed policy, you've got no policies, no plans and no alternative budget, it's time for State Labor to step up, and we'll be calling on you to do that. But based on the announcement yesterday from the leader for the opposition, this Labor Party is all about cutting jobs and increasing taxes. Well, we're not going down that track. We've said no new taxes under our government. We abide by that, and you'll see that demonstrated again on Budget Day this Thursday.
Thank you. Deputy Leader of the Greens.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I rise to make my contribution on the matter of public importance, debt and deficit, and say that we are in a debt and deficit crisis. There is absolutely no doubt, and I think on Thursday this will be writ large and the full scale of it will be revealed. In February, obviously, the revised estimates report demonstrated that the last budget that was delivered by this government didn't get it right and couldn't predict it accurately. Of course, deficit blew out by $500,000 to $1.3 billion. Debt rose and it'll be in the order of $9.6 billion by 2028, costing us $500 million a year to service, simply to service. And of course, Saul Estlake has made some pretty dire predictions about where the debt figure is actually headed. $16 billion by 2035 is his prediction, what he's anticipating. And that had cost us a record $750 million per year simply to service. So we do have a crisis on our hands, and it's not just a debt and deficit crisis, it's an intergenerational crisis, because it is our kids and our grandkids that are going to have to be servicing this going forward. And Saul Estlake also made it clear, absolutely clear in his report, a review of the state's finances, that this is because of active policy decisions by the government. Yes, we've had COVID. Yes, we've had the Commission of Inquiry, but he made the very good point that the debt and deficit challenge and crisis that we're facing is absolutely a figment of government policy. Look, we'll be looking very closely, Premier, and Treasurer, and I'll invite you again to spell it out very, very clearly, because we don't see any pathway to surplus on the trajectory that you're headed. On the track you're going down, there is no pathway to surplus. There is simply additional deficit and extreme debt. So this Thursday's budget is going to be very telling. We predict it's going to be an absolute shocker. Already, our officers are already being contacted by numerous stakeholders across the community, and community services organisations are contacting us, but really desperately worried about the money that they have relied upon to deliver incredible services. I went to the opening a couple of weeks ago of Community Houses Week, and it was incredibly eye-opening. I'm conscious of the incredible role that community houses play in our community. But at that event, we heard from Louise, who, because of a physical and mental disability, did not want to be exposed to other people, had to get dragged into a community house, ultimately started to volunteer in the community house, ultimately started to build her confidence and contribution to society, and is now on the board board of that community house and actually stood up at that event amongst all of us. Some of the people in this chamber were at that to talk about her experience. That's what good investment of public money in community services and community organisations can deliver. So Thursday is going to be incredibly telling about this government's commitment, because what we're going to see, and I'm going to anchor back here to the stadium, is a government that's utterly committed, not only through this completely draconian legislation that looks like it's going to abandon all sorts of important principles about decision making and the spending of government money, but it's going to fast track and stamp a stadium that we don't want. The polls are really clear. People don't want this stadium. We don't need this stadium. We've got stadiums. We've got them just a couple of kilometres over the river, and we've got York Park with the best playing surface in the country. And of course, when it comes to the budget and debt and deficit, we cannot afford it. Finally, the government's admitted this is going to cost more than $715 million, and it's acknowledging today $945 million. We know it's not where it ends. The Cradle Cableway, the High Performance Centre, the Spirits, the Wharf for the Spirits, they've all blown out by massive elements. And we heard just today, from the Minister for Business, the Minister responsible for this project, that it's only 50% designed. It's 50% designed. How can you accurately forecast the cost and the expenditure on a project that is only 50% designed? And the Minister could not even answer the question about how Macquarie Point Development Corporation is going to borrow. So the $375 million and not one more red cent commitment from the Premier was an absolute misrepresentation. He was definitely trying to cauterise this issue on day one of the election campaign, but the problem is the business case always included borrowings as part of the capital costs. So the Premier has been completely deceptive when it comes to the spend that the government will put into this stadium.
Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to make a contribution on this important topic in this budget week. The government has given up on trying to fix the budget. That's what we've heard this morning in question time, and that's effectively what they have foreshadowed for Thursday, is that they are not interested in balancing the books anymore. They're not interested in anything except their own political survival, the political survival of this Premier and this Treasurer who has to try and make these numbers work. And, Honourable Speaker, when you think about the Liberals and numbers, you just think about the fact no one believes them anymore. This is a government that told us that the deficit this year, or that there wouldn't be a deficit this year, that this year there would be a surplus. Before they had to come back to this House, told us there would be a surplus a few years ago, predicted a much smaller deficit this year, then came back and asked for around $500 million in a SUP, and now predicting over $1 billion worth of deficit just for this year. This is a government that told us that it would cost $35 million for the fifth lane on the Southern Outlet, Honourable Speaker. I think when we get the numbers, they'll look more than 5 times over that. It could be as high as 10 times over that by the time this project is actually finished. This is a government that told us that the berth for our new Spirit of Tasmania would cost $90 million. Now it costs nearly $500 million. This is a government that simply is not believable when it comes to the numbers. When they talk numbers, they have no credibility. No one would believe it. This is intergenerational theft, what they are doing, and the budgets that they are overseeing are nothing like budgets that any Tasmanian government has ever delivered before. The size of the deficit is enormous every single year. And we're not talking about the COVID budgets, we're talking about the budgets that came after that. When Premier Rockcliffe took over, that is when this started. Billion-dollar deficits, billion-dollar cash deficits, taking Tasmania from a position where we had no net debt in 2014, and the Minister for Finance is in the chamber right now, who put out a media release only a week or so ago claiming this is about me. His repeated attempts to claim Labor left Tasmania with no debt is shameful, after again trying to peddle his tired mistruth with the media. Honourable Speaker, Tasmanian Labor left Tasmania with no net debt. I know that because I opened the Treasurer's annual financial report for 2013-14 and I can see it in the numbers. Net debt, actual 2013-14. is negative $208 million, meaning that there was net cash and investments in the bank. It is a fact. I've said it here at the lectern in the Parliament. If that's wrong, Minister for Finance, stand up and call me out on it. It's true. It's in your numbers. I don't know who told you to put that media release out, but it is factually wrong and should consider correcting the record. Perhaps you are the Minister for Finance. We're not sure. We know you refused to implement the government's pokies policy, and so that part of the portfolio has moved over to Minister Barnett. We're not quite sure what the policy is. The policy could be to continue on with the former Treasurer's card-based play. That's what he says. The Premier tells his stakeholders that's not the policy. Who would know what they're doing? Honourable Speaker, they are a complete mess. They have given up. And it's Tasmanians who are paying the price when it comes to this government and their failed attempts to manage the budget. Yes, the issues that are raised in Parliament in question time every morning are important. All of the issues are important. But nothing could be as fundamentally important as making sure we've got a government that is able to manage our budget, because from that, all of the services that Tasmanians rely on come from. And at the moment, we have a government that has absolutely no plan to sort this mess out. Their only plan is to continue to increase the debt, to continue to raise the deficits. And as the Shadow Treasurer said earlier today, we've got to act. This Parliament needs to hold this government accountable. We can hold this government accountable. And the bill that the Shadow Treasurer has tabled today takes the first step to do that. We cannot allow them to continue unchecked to do what they've been doing. These deficits will not hurt Tasmanians today, but they will hurt them next year and the year after, and it will continue to increase. The size of corrective action gets even greater the longer this is allowed to happen. And the big challenge for the future government, for this government, will be the $500 million every year that is spent just servicing the debt. That's not paying down the debt, that's just servicing the debt once you get $10 billion worth of net debt.
Time has expired. I'll call the member for Clark, Mr Barakis.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And it's ironic being lectured on number credibility by the party that had to reprint their own election costings 11 times, not 24 hours after publishing them last year, Honourable Speaker. But on this MPI, Honourable Speaker, our state's financials are strong. Our debt's manageable, and our economic fundamentals are leading the nation in many, many key areas. So while Labor can continue to trade in their relentless negativity, we will continue to deliver real results for Tasmanians. Let's talk about those real results for a second, Honourable Speaker. Our unemployment's at a record low of 3.8%, which is half. I'll say that again, it's half what it was under the last Labor Green government. Over 40,000 new jobs have been created since 2014, and our wage growth is the best in the country at 3.9%. That's more people in work, and they're earning more than ever. Our gross state product is up 26.3% since we came into office. Retail trade is up to record highs, and our business confidence is the number one in Australia for 2 months in a row, according to the NAB. These things are important, Honourable Speaker, because a strong economy is needed for us to continue to fund our essential services. That's why our focus is on getting the balance right, by investing in the things that are important to Tasmanians and ensuring our economy can continue to grow. It means we can invest more in what Tasmanians care about: health, education, housing and infrastructure. As Minister Petruzma and the Treasurer announced on Sunday, we'll be spending a record amount on health over the forward estimates, nearly $10 million a day. We'll do that without raising taxes. And so what does Labor offer in return as the so-called alternative government? Not a single alternative budget for 11 years, not even a plan, not even numbers that add up. They preach fiscal responsibility while proposing vague savings and billions of dollars in promises. Their new gimmick, their fiscal deficit bill, would turn budget decisions into a circus and tie the hands of any future government. Worse, their proposals necessitate jacking up GBE fees, which could mean car regos as high as $4,000. I'm sure the Greens would love that. It means power bills up $13,000 and bus fares up 1,000%. They made $4 billion in promises during the election, but had zero detail on how they proposed to pay for them. Their only solution? A fantasy land, savings from nowhere. Now let's be clear. Federal Labor is forecasting 10 straight years of deficits. They won't reach surplus until at least 2034-35. That's $1 trillion of national debt with no credible path to fix it. Meanwhile, the Tasmanian Liberal government has a real plan to return to surplus by 29-30. What does state Labor do? They criticise our budget but refuse to release one on their own. Even after being called on twice now, having ignored the will of the House once, after continuously, we hear in this place, continuously saying the government needs to respect the will of the House, the government needs to listen to the will of the House. When the House expresses their will regarding the Labor Party and their lack of an alternative or a plan, they'll just ignore that conveniently. So they've got no costed policies, they've got no alternative plan. All they have are empty attacks, Honourable Speaker. And we won't be lectured by a party that left this state with a huge superannuation liability for which they still won't take responsibility. Meanwhile, Labor's record when they were last in government, in contrast, Honourable Speaker, had the worst business confidence in the nation. Businesses had said the government was actively working against them. They had brought Tasmania and its economy to a screeching halt. Their current plan? Well, that was exposed in the last session of Parliament, where Labor voted to legislate higher own source revenue targets, which in plain speak for those listening means tax hikes and increased fees and charges. $2.7 billion in tax hikes by 2027-28, and which is $1.85 million a day ripped from Tasmanian families and businesses. So hidden behind all their vague slogans like maximising government business profits is just code for high power bills and stealth charges. So Mr Whealy should explain how taxing Tasmanians into the ground can be seen as fiscal discipline. Let's not forget their $4 billion election con, funded by $2 billion in phantom cuts and 11 corrections to their costings. So on this side, Honourable Speaker, we continue to back our economic plan with real investment, which includes $5.1 billion in infrastructure over the forward estimates, which follows $6 billion invested since 2014, including the new Bridgewater Bridge, K-Block at the Roy Hobart Hospital, the Midland Highway upgrade, major rail and irrigation upgrades, and many, many more. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Labor created their liabilities. Labor walked away from fair infrastructure funding. Labor has no plan. We on the other side have a plan to grow the economy.
The member's time has expired. The call to the member for Bass, Ms Lindo.
Thank you, Speaker. It's not my pleasure ever to speak about this government and their capacity to manage the budget, nor the economy for Tasmanians, but it is my pleasure to stand on this side of the House as part of the Tasmanian Labor team, which are looking for this government to install discipline and good financial management. We are calling on the government to do this. However, we know at our heart that it is beyond this government to do it. And not only is it beyond their capabilities, it's actually beyond their will, because it is clear, not only from today, but from recent weeks and recent months, that this government has given up. This government are in such a poor position where they don't know how to take action anymore, that they have given up on being responsible for Tasmanians. And it is our Tasmanians in our Tasmanian households, our Tasmanian small businesses, our large industrials that are actually bearing the brunt of this management of this government. Members from the other side can stand up and use light-hearted language about a serious issue. The member that just took his seat talked about a circus and fantasies. There is no doubt that Tasmanians across this state, across many levels of our community, have lost trust in this government and no longer believe anything they say. We know that when presented with government furphies in the budget, that it has occurred now for so many years on repeat that the community are becoming wise to it. Where the Treasurer talks about a pathway to surplus, it actually doesn't exist. It is untruthful for this Treasurer to say that there is a pathway to surplus in the budget, because it is not real, it is untrue, and this government must stop actually taking the Tasmanian community for a ride. Saul Estlake recently quoted about the government's pathway to surplus, said, and I quote, "The 2024-25 budget," so the one that they said that it started in, "does not have or chart a credible pathway back to surplus. It cannot continue. This government cannot continue to misrepresent the complete mess that they have created financially. This Premier stands up and members of his government stand up and talk about all sorts of lists of positive things that are happening in Tasmania. Not many of them are happening because of the action of this government. Much of that is happening because of the patient and determined efforts of businesses in our community. It is such a fallacy to say that we're in a good position as a state when the government can't even be honest about the assumptions and the projections that they make in their budgets. And we can see this from the past, and we know it's going to be true again on Thursday. Just in the 2021 budget, the assumptions that were projected about the outcomes for the financial years in the 23-24 year were they were going to have a $39 million positive outcome for the year. But we know once they tracked through another 12 months, they'd reduced that down to $19 million. Once they got to the actual budget for the 23-24 year, it was going to be a negative 297. You go through the half-year reports, you add in the Liberal election costings, the actual outcome. So in 21-22, they projected there to be a $39 million surplus in the budget. The actual outcome in the 23-24 year was a $1.5 billion deficit. This Premier, for the last 3 years, stands and tells Tasmania that it's been tough. We had to go through a pandemic. He used that again today in terms of covering over his failed ability to commit to honesty in Tasmanians and cannot seriously say that I once estimated $39 million benefit and now it's a $1.5 billion deficit. The last 3 years have been the 3 worst financial outcomes on record for Tasmania at the feet of this Premier. Not only did it happen in the 23-24 year, happening again in this 24-25 year, and we know on Thursday it will happen again. Tasmanians cannot trust the narrative that this government add to their budget mess. We know that just this morning, on the back of our Shadow Treasurer's tabling of a bill to seek budget discipline, that the Premier actually intends to continue to have massive deficits in the budget coming forward because he pushed back on the budget discipline that we're asking for this government to make. We know that a credible government with responsible budget management wouldn't need to activate, and this parliament wouldn't need to sit over the top of the bill that we've tabled because it is the right way to manage money. Tasmanian Labor are seeking to be responsible and asking the government to be responsible with their financial management. We're seeking to grow the Tasmanian economy. Our approach would be to be aggressive with our economy, to support our businesses like we did just yesterday with the major industrials, and we call on the government, be honest with Tasmanians when you deliver the budget on Thursday.
We still have time for contributions on this debate. Take the member for Lyons Badger.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I'm pleased to hear from all sides except the Liberals that this is intergenerational debt and deficit. And it is largely, we are continually going to see it get worse with the increase in cost blowouts of projects like the stadium. Yes, it started just over $700 million. Now it's up to $1 billion, just as the Greens had said it was going to be all along, and that is still without the facilitating infrastructure to be invested in. The Tyndalls Range, still $40 million since 2021. Somehow it's just magically immune to any kind of inflation despite the project changes. So release the new business case. Where is it? Where's the new business case for the Cradle Mountain Cableway that went from $60 million to $225 million. All of these projects are actually non-essential. So why are we pursuing intergenerational debt and deficit for future Tasmanians over them? This is economic debt and deficit, but we also have environmental and nature deficit, the climate, biodiversity and extinction crisis. There are over 600 flora and fauna species in Tasmania that are listed as threatened. And that is due to habitat destruction, climate change, disease and invasive species impact. And this is in part being driven by the wrong investment priorities. We have ranger positions in parks that are not being filled, yet we're going to spend over $265+ million on a cableway in the Tyndalls Range, which is not going to protect nature in the same way that our rangers could, our field officers, that scientists or well-funded proper programs could. What about $10 million into the West Coast, the destructive four-wheel drive plan, through a living cultural heritage site of outstanding universal values. That $10 million could have gone into the state's first Aboriginal managed national park in Cooperoona Nyara to protect nature, to protect that incredible culture from the Palawa people, the oldest living culture in the world. We could have had appropriate alternative regenerative tourism opportunities like birding and dark skies. A paper from Carlson and Taylor in 2010 on four-wheel drive tourists in the Northern Territory showed that they spent the same on average as your average tourist did. In that market segment, there wasn't a huge increase to be had. Birding, which has no impact on the environment, it's not impacting cultural heritage sites, had a $2.6 billion spend in Australia for the year in 2023 to 2024, and Tasmania is yet to fully capitalise on that. It's the same with dark skies. On average in the key US sites in Arizona, Utah, Colorado and New Mexico, just to name a few, the US dollar of spend per tourist average per year is $5.8 billion. And those dark skies are so important, not just for tourist spend, but also because of the cultural importance that they have. That is why it is so important to protect them. Now, destruction is, of course, also driving the nature debt and deficit. So it is absurd that there is the ongoing government subsidisation of the native forest logging industry in this state. It was not on my parliamentary bingo card to be driving to work yesterday and see an enormous primeval tree on the back of a truck, going to the chip mill. On average, 90% of our croups are going to low-grade paper pulp through the chip industry. It is 2025 and we know that that tree should still be standing, that it should be critical habitat for so many different species. It should have still been there. It should have been sequestering carbon for us. But no, instead we are cheaply selling it off. Yesterday in Ellendale, out the back of where I call home, there was a coop that had its work stopped. Rightfully so. There are 4 wedge-tailed eagle nests around those coops, and it is coming up to breeding season. I can tell you firsthand the number of devils that are in those coops, not to mention the endemic Tasmanian white goshawk. Now, our forests right across this island are home to the endemic masked owl, the sublime 40-spotted pardalote, and the swift parrots who have just left this island for migration. And when they return later this year, they will have less habitat here for breeding because it will have been destroyed. So yes, we have an intergenerational economic debt and deficit, but we also have an intergenerational nature debt and deficit. And if we do not properly address the nature debt, our economic debt will absolutely get worse as well, because we are going to see climate-induced emergencies continually get worse, and they are going to require more investment. We simply cannot continue to ignore and choose the wrong priorities for our investments. It's time to get serious. It is time to admit and properly address the climate and biodiversity crisis so that we can address the nature and environment debt and deficit, not just in this state, for people right around the world.
Time for the debate has expired. The question is the matter be noted. Those with that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Order to the day.
Honourable Speaker, order of the day number 8.
Order of the day number 8, Youth Justice Facility Development Bill 2025, second reading.
Honourable Speaker.
Okay. Call the Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I move that the bill now be read a second time. Honourable Speaker, I bring to the House today a bill that supports the urgent delivery of the new Tasmanian Youth Justice Facility, which will provide for the fundamental rehabilitation and developmental needs of children and young people in detention in Tasmania and deliver on our commitment to close the Ashley Youth Detention Centre as soon as possible. The goal of the government's youth justice reform program is to improve community safety, reduce the involvement of children and young people in the youth justice system, and improve outcomes for children and young people who do offend. The government's youth justice blueprint is underpinned by a public health approach, which is focused on supporting children and young people to address the factors that led to their offending in the first place, thereby breaking the cycle of reoffending. This approach will drive the operational model of the new facility and the youth justice system within which it operates. Establishment of the new facility is a priority project under the Youth Justice Blueprint and a prerequisite for the Commission of Inquiry's Recommendation 12.1 to close Ashley Youth Detention Centre as soon as possible. Significant work has already been undertaken to accelerate the project, including establishment of the Youth Justice Reform Task Force, a Youth Justice Reform Expert Panel, Aboriginal Reference Group and Community Reference Group, development of a Tasmanian Youth Justice Model of Care, selection and public consultation on site options for the new facility, completion of site investigations, including Aboriginal heritage, threatened species and geotechnical surveys, engagement with local councils, neighbouring landowners, land users and businesses, confirmation of 466 Brighton Road, Pontville as the site for the new facility, appointment of the lead design consultant and consultant team and commencement of facility design, Cabinet approval of a revised project budget estimate, finalisation of the Tasmanian Youth Justice Facility Master Plan, which has now been released, commencement of a public engagement period on the Master Plan, and design and planning for site access, landscaping and enabling site services, which is currently underway. Honourable Speaker, the bill will enable the Tasmanian Youth Justice Facility project to progress with greater certainty and reduce potential risks and significant delays to the project receiving approval under the Land Use and Planning Approvals Act 1993. We recognise the importance of ensuring that this legislation is narrowly targeted. It is limited in its operation to the facility with clearly prescribed parameters to constrain the scope of development permitted under the Act. To this end, the bill creates a new Act that will enable the declaration of the project such that the Act will only apply to this development on this site for the purpose of constructing a youth justice facility for or on behalf of the state, up to a certain size, both floor area and height, where appropriate setbacks are provided, and where on-site wastewater treatment is below a certain threshold. The bill establishes a modified Land Use Planning and Approvals Act approval process to ensure the project can proceed with minimum further delay while maintaining appropriate safeguards and public input. It ensures that the project will be approved by the Planning Authority and will exclude third-party appeals which could potentially delay the project by up to 12 months. Importantly, the bill provides for the development to be assessed by the Southern Midlands Council under the normal LUPA process, including a public exhibition period and community representations. This means that the community can still have their say and Council will still assess the project against the planning scheme. In a similar manner, the bill ensures a clear path to construction by removing the need for notification prior to protection work being undertaken under the Building Act 2016 and by preventing disputes about protection works from delaying construction. The bill will also allow the Minister for Children and Youth to direct the Recorder of Titles to create, amend, rearrange or extinguish a folio of the register to facilitate the consolidation of land titles including 466 Brighton Road title, the site, and the 36 Rifle Range Road title for the access road to the site, following consultation with the Treasurer, the Minister responsible for the Crown Lands Act 1976 and the Minister responsible for the Youth Justice Act 1997. Finally, Speaker, the bill provides that a resolution of both Houses of Parliament will exempt the project from the requirements of the Public Works Committee Act 1914, given the assessment of the project's necessity or advisability has already been substantially met through the Commission of Inquiry itself and related parliamentary committees, which have upheld the need for this project to be completed as a matter of urgency. Speaker, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to replace a dated and inappropriate facility with a purpose-built environment that reflects contemporary thinking on youth justice, rehabilitation and trauma-informed care. There is significant public support and expectation for this project to be delivered as soon as possible, and significant work has been done to come up with a site and a design that meets these expectations. This bill will ensure the facility can be delivered in 2027. Without it, the project could be delayed for a further 12 months or prevented from proceeding at all. Speaker, this bill has been open for public feedback, and through this process the government received 3 submissions. The first, from the Southern Midlands Council, suggests that consideration be made to strengthen the provisions relating to the application of LUPA to avoid any doubt that the council must grant a permit for the proposed development. Additionally, the Southern Midlands Council raised that the current bill could require a permit for development that does not meet the requirements of the planning scheme, and concerns regarding the works to Rifle Range Road, which the bill does not provide approvals for. The submission from the Brighton Council expressed opposition to the bill on the basis it could undermine confidence in Tasmania's planning system, and that the removal of appeal rights contradicts planning principles, especially with regards to public participation in the process. Additionally, Brighton Council noted that unresolved issues remain around the facility's potential impacts on neighbouring land uses, questioning how these will be addressed if the approval is guaranteed. I beg your pardon. The final submission, received from a group of legal academics, claims that the bill bypasses existing planning laws, limits council's role as planning authority, requires members of parliament to approve the development, imposes unreasonably short timeframes and related matters. It should be noted, however, that this submission does contain several errors and incorrect assumptions. Honourable Speaker, in response to the matters raised in these submissions, I outline the following. This bill provides for an assessment to be undertaken using the existing Land Use Planning and Approvals Act in a particular way for this specific project. The bill does not provide power to the Parliament to approve the development. The final permit will be issued by the Planning Authority consistent with an ordinary development application. The role of Planning Authority remains largely as it would for any permitted application, whereby the Planning Authority is responsible for the assessment of the application and any conditions or restrictions considered before the permit is issued. The bill encourages public involvement and participation through the public exhibition process, whereby the Planning Authority will be able to receive and consider representations consistent with the process for a discretionary planning application. It will be incumbent on the Tasmanian Government to provide sufficient information in the development application to address potential impacts, and for these to be assessed by the Planning Authority as part of their consideration of the application. Under the bill, the Planning Authority will have the same amount of time to consider and assess the development application as with any other discretionary development, including public exhibition. The Government proposes to amend the bill to include additional wording to confirm that a permit must meet the requirements of the Tasmanian planning scheme for the permit to be issued, which would be consistent with how any permitted application would be treated. The works to Rifle Range Road are a matter for Brighton Council, and following further discussions with that council, I'm advised that the bill does not need to be amended to include the proposed works to Rifle Range Road, as they will be able to be dealt with via an exemption under LUPA from the requirement to seek development application. And Public Works Committee exemption is being sought as the need to close the Ashley Youth Detention Centre and build a new facility is already widely acknowledged. Speaker, I also wish to advise that the Government intends to move amendments to the bill as drafted in the committee stage. In summary, these amendments are as follows. To amend the definition of relevant site to ensure that the bill continues to apply after adhering the 2 titles associated with 466 Brighton Road and 36 Rifle Range Road. This amendment is required as once the two titles are adhered, the existing title reference will no longer apply. This change will ensure that the bill continues to apply after adhering the titles. Second, to increase the gross floor area to be inclusive of enclosed roof plant spaces, noting that this does not change the footprint of the facility from the master plan and the scope and bed numbers remain the same. This amendment is proposed for avoidance of doubt, noting variations in interpretation of gross floor area. Thirdly, to safeguard the 20-metre setback provision at the shared boundary with privately owned properties, while simultaneously permitting the development to take place in closer proximity to the boundary between the two government-owned parcels of land. And to clarify the requirement that approval must be granted only where the requirements of the planning scheme can be met in direct response to the matter raised by the Southern Midlands Council. The Council identified that under the prior wording, a permit must be granted regardless of whether the application met the requirements of the scheme. This change ensures that approval must be granted only where the requirements of the planning scheme can be met. Honourable Deputy Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the bill? Call on the member for Clark.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to make a contribution on behalf of the Labor Party on this bill and note that the Shadow Minister is my colleague Sarah Lovell, who sits in the other place, member for Rumney. But Sarah has been through the detail of this bill, as has our caucus, and we've reached the decision that we will support the bill, albeit with some concerns. But I do want to start my contribution today by reflecting on the reason that we're here, debating a bill like this for any reason. And that reason is, of course, because of the years and decades, really, of evidence that Ashley Youth Detention Centre is not fit for purpose, and it's in fact a place that inflicts enormous harm on young people who are forced to spend time there through our youth justice system. The evidence is overwhelming that Ashley has been failing for many, many years. There have been calls for Ashley to be closed for decades, and to be quite honest, I think governments of all colours weren't willing to tackle that political issue for a very long time. It was a very welcome, almost shock announcement when Peter Gutwein made that commitment at the 2021 estimates, I think. I could be wrong, it might have been the following year. 2021, the Minister's nodding, thank you. He made the announcement that Ashley would be closed as soon as possible, and the time frame that the Premier at the time committed to was that it would be closed around about 2024. But that time frame has now been pushed back, and as we can see from this bill, there are reasons for that. The Commission of Inquiry, of course, has also concluded its work, the Commission of Inquiry into government responses to child sexual abuse in institutional settings, and that Commission's work also made one thing abundantly clear: Ashley isn't fit for purpose, and continuing to hold children there will pose an unacceptable risk to those young people. We need to remember that the young people held at Ashley, yes, they have engaged in offending behaviour or alleged to have participated in offending behaviour, but they are children. They are not, by the large part, convicted. Often young people are held there on remand. And by and large, they are victims of a broken system. Many of them are on remand there because they don't have somewhere else to go, somewhere safe to be bailed by the courts. These are young people who we have most likely, as a system, as a state, been failing since they were a very young age. They are vulnerable young people, many of whom have experienced trauma and abuse and neglect in their lives. And being placed in a prison-like setting instead of receiving community support-based supports that might prevent them from further offending exacerbates the problem. Some former detainees have described the conditions at Ashley as damaging, unsafe and harmful. We've heard stories of low staffing levels, culture of violence and abuse, and a lack of appropriate rehabilitation services, all of which contribute to an environment where young people often leave worse off than when they arrived. Our youth justice system should be there to give young people the best chance that they can have to stop participating in offending behaviour, to get onto a different path, to be able to make a different choice in their lives. And I've said it in this place before, that we know we have a youth justice system that's failing when we see, as we do now, most people who spend time in our youth justice system going on to spend time in the adult justice system later in life. That's a really sad statistic, and it's not one that we should be proud of as a state. If we had a youth justice system that was working well, we would see less young people finding their way into the adult justice system later in life. We would see young people provided the supports and the rehabilitation options that they need to be able to get onto a better path, to be able to re-engage with education, with family where that's safe and appropriate to do so, with training, with work, job opportunities. But at the moment we are just seeing a system that recycles people in and out the front door, a revolving door. And we know that it's not appropriate. So that is what was recognised when Peter Gutwein made that made that announcement at the 2021 estimates table. I believe that he was responding to those years of concerns raised by community organisations, by public sector workers and by parliamentarians that Ashley was a dangerous place for young people and it needed to close. I think he was recognising that a community-based system of therapeutic justice needed to be the alternative. That's not to say that young people shouldn't be held responsible for committing crimes when they do. But we want to be able to make sure that we don't just keep seeing a revolving door at Ashley that leads later to a revolving door at Risdon. Members are aware of many of the brave former detainees and workers who raised concerns, and community organisations as well, who raised concerns about widespread abuse and mistreatment of children inside Ashley, who described incidents of mental torture, verbal, physical and sexual abuse, including some of the most graphic kind of forms of abuse that anybody could imagine. And these were historical abuse cases as well as contemporary cases and allegations of abuse, of assault, of rape that had been going on for decades, Deputy Speaker. So there's no question that Ashley needs to close, and we have joined those calls now for many years, but it has been too slow. The Commission of Inquiry said as soon as possible, and I know that there were community organisations who were putting their hands up to talk to government, to work with government about being able to house young people on remand. Those are people who haven't been charged. They haven't finished going through the court process yet. They, if they're appropriate to be bailed, should be bailed, and they should be able to be held in a community setting. But that wasn't possible for all sorts of reasons. And as a last resort, so many young people ended up at Ashley on remand. That's not a safe place, and it's not appropriate for young people on remand to have to be held in a prison-like environment. For those reasons, we have, for many years now, been supporting the calls to close Ashley as soon as possible and replace it with community-based facilities that will hold young people to account, but will do so in a way that might see them reduce their offending behaviour over time. Deputy Speaker, it has been too slow. The fact that we are here now in 2025, a year past the date that Premier Gutwein said that Ashley would be closed, is a really devastating blow to the people who work with young people in the youth justice system and the community organisations that support them and their families, who welcomed that announcement and knew that they wanted change. We have decided to support this bill because we don't want to stand in the way of the ability for the government to act on that Commission of Inquiry recommendation to close Ashley as soon as possible. We've all had briefings from the government about the proposed new redevelopment and some of the changes to culture and changes to practice that will be possible in that new facility. But it does need to be recognised that part of the reason that we're here with an enabling bill like this is because the planning system is also broken in this state. And since their last period in opposition, the 2013-14 period, the Liberal Party in Tasmania has been promising to fix Tasmania's planning system. It was going to be a faster, fairer, better, cheaper planning system, and they have failed to deliver that. That is something that government needs to consider for a range of reasons, primarily housing, of course, which is something that I've talked about in this place a lot in the past when I was Shadow Housing Minister. But the planning system is broken, and so needing to have enabling legislation like this is something that shouldn't be done lightly, and it shouldn't be done regularly. Speaker, this bill, as we've heard the Minister explain, will still enable... I'm not going to try and paraphrase. I'm going to try and paraphrase the Minister's words. The relevant councils will still have the authority to act as a planning authority. They will only be able to approve the new facility if it meets the planning scheme, and they can't refuse the proposal if it meets the planning scheme. So the checks and balances that are in this bill are enough to satisfy the Labor Party to support it, albeit that this shouldn't be the way that we always go about developments. But I think that there are opportunities, there will be opportunities for community input, and if it doesn't fit the planning scheme, then the council will be able to reject the proposal, is my understanding. I'm sure the Minister will tell me if I'm wrong about that. But that essentially, if everything is met in the application and it satisfies the planning scheme, it will be approved, and this bill will facilitate that. Speaker, I know that the Minister has responded to the 3 submissions that he's received, but I did want to ask some specific questions that have arisen out of the submission provided by some legal professors, Anya Herkemeyer, Professor Jan McDonald, Dr Cleo Hansen Laurie, Dr Philippa McCormack and Dr Emily Bulott. Some of those issues that they raised were responded to in the government's response back to them and in the amended second reading, but I did want to clarify some of what they said. On page 5 of their letter, they did talk about the fact that the bill enables the Minister at any time and on more than one occasion to alter the footprint, waste volumes and proximity of the building to the boundary of the property. And they give an example, a hypothetical example. They said, therefore, a situation may arise where the council has imposed conditions on the development. The Minister alters one of the statutory conditions as a result of which compliance with the council condition becomes difficult or impossible. For example, the council may impose a condition that a 15-metre fixed green zone be established in the 20-metre setback of the property. However, if the ministerial regulation reduces the required setback of the buildings to 5 metres, then the council condition cannot be met. And they argue that subordinate legislation to enable conflicting legal requirements to be imposed on a building project is incompatible with the rule of law requirement that the law be clear and certain. And I do share that concern. And I wondered if the Minister, in his summing up, could go to that concern specifically, because my understanding is that the council, while they'll be expected to approve the proposal if it meets the planning scheme, they can still do so with conditions, is my understanding. And those conditions may be imposed as a result of community consultation. So that point that's been raised by those law professors, I think, does need some clarification on the Hansard around what capacity the council will have to impose conditions on the air approval and what capacity, if any, the government has to, for want of a better word, to override or reverse those conditions. And finally, Speaker, before I conclude my comments, I'll just ask, and I do apologise if these timeframes are already outlined in the bill and I've missed it, but it would be beneficial to hear directly from the Minister around what opportunities for public input there have been. I know that there was a period of public consultation that closed on the 25th of May. Whether that's the end of the community consultation opportunities, or whether council can still hear from community in their work when they start to consider the proposal and consider whether or not they put any conditions on their approval, or whether those opportunities for public feedback have stopped or finished. I may come to some other questions if we reach the committee stage, but for now I think I have probably put enough on the record for today. And while this is an unusual way to go about seeking approval to build something like a youth detention facility, it does point to a broken planning system. For the Labor Party, the imperative to close Ashley as soon as possible is really front of mind. And very, very important, because we have seen now decades of abuse, and we want to be able to say that we have a youth justice system that not only keeps the community safe but keeps young people safe and does give young people the absolute best opportunity for rehabilitation and to be able to make a better choice, to not end up, as we see many young people ending up in the adult justice system as well. So with those comments, I'll take my seat and look forward to the remainder of the debate.
Okay, any other call on Ms Rosso?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to give the Greens' response to the Youth Justice Facility Development Bill 2025, and I want to begin by centring young people in our minds in this debate. Young people in the past who have experienced harmful detention in Ashley Youth Detention Centre. Young people who today are detained in a facility that should have closed long ago. And young people who come from extreme disadvantage, including Aboriginal children and children who live with poverty and often significant trauma. Children who are effectively punished for being Aboriginal or poor or unsafe. We have not done well by young people who come into contact with youth justice in Tasmania, and this is well documented. There has been untold damage to children over decades. But there also have been some stories that have been told, and what we have heard is truly terrible. Young people have been abused and their rights have been repeatedly violated. In the middle of that, from the early 2000s, there have been calls for the closure of Ashley Youth Detention Centre. Later, in 2016, a government report recommended the closure of Ashley Youth Detention Centre. And yet it took 5 years beyond that report for the government to make any move to close, single move on closing Ashley. Eventually, in September 2021, the Liberal government finally announced plans to close Ashley Youth Detention Centre within 3 years by the end of 2024. That deadline was missed, and here we are halfway through 2025 and still Ashley Youth Detention Centre remains open. The government has failed to meet its own commitment to close Ashley. In 2023, the Commission of Inquiry called for the immediate closure of Ashley Youth Detention Centre.